Okay, so let's jump into a very fascinating topic, retail pricing we are talking today about. And very quick introduction from my side. So my name is Patricia. I'm working in the sales and pricing area for Harvard, based in our Zurich office in Switzerland. And actually, when I started to prepare this presentation, I figured out that yeah, retail fascinates me much longer than I thought. So I actually started in the 90s with the first internship with the at Nielsen, one of the global leading players in tracking retail data. So I worked there in the retail area, and I still remember that already there, yeah, many years ago. We were fascinated by the amount and the complexity of data available. So some of you might remember that actually in the very late 70s, the first scanner devices had been introduced in German retail shops. So before that, everything was done manually. And actually the great shift there was that from the, let's say, mid 80s onwards, retailers had a huge amount of data, and this was seen as an opportunity, but also as a challenge, of course, because retail wasn't really prepared to deal with this data. And yeah, data will definitely be a topic today also in our discussion on retail pricing. So after that internship, I continued to work in the area of retail. I wrote my thesis in the 90s on optimization actually of product ranges in retail shops. And I have to be honest, sometimes I still hope that shops would would be more specific in the way they tailor their product ranges. But yeah, that's also a topic I think then for later for the discussion. And it would be great to see also your view on that. Then I worked later as a consultant at Booz Allen Hamilton, and one of the big projects I led was the establishment of the customer card business unit for a German bank. And now you might wonder why does this belong to the topic of retail? Well, actually, it was for a big retailer that we established the first card systems. This was also, it was in the late 90s when a couple of legal changes happened in Germany. So it was allowed to introduce these different types of loyalty cards. Some with a debit function, then later on, some even with a credit function. And the cards, of course, also opened the opportunity to collect much more differentiated, so customer-specific data in order to better understand behavior. Then during the early years of 2000, I worked as a retail analyst for Jupiter Media Matrix. And after that, yeah, I joined another consulting company. And here are just some of the logos of the companies. Yeah, I was quite happy to support with different types of projects in the area of product range optimization and pricing. And having said that, I'd like to hand over to Fabian to give him, of course, the opportunity to introduce himself.
Thanks, Patricia. It feels like stage. We positioned you as retail, me as pricing. In the end, both did the same, more or less. So yes, to keep it short, I started my career in consulting, specialized on pricing during that time. I then also took some time off to do my PhD in pricing, more on the behavioral aspects and the psychological aspects of pricing back in the days. I also realized it's nice to write slides about pricing, but therefore I wanted to do my own price changes and see the impact, and I joined Zooplus, Europe's largest online shop for pet supplies, leading the pricing team and building my own pricing tool back then, and scaling this knowledge back at BCG after a couple of years, implementing multiple pricing tools and realizing, well, the best pricing tool actually is Quicklizard, which is also why I joined the company end of 23, being responsible for the product, which I highly enjoy. And I'm also happy to give you some more insights about how we think about pricing and how a pricing transformation and a professional pricing tool can generate value. And looking forward to a good discussion. Feel free to ask questions, as Patricia said, throughout the course in the Q&A. Let's kick it off.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And maybe just one comment. I think that's an aspect which really connects us is the aspect of behavioral pricing. So yeah, I'm still fascinated about after so many years to learn more about decision processes of customers, about all these biases or heuristics. And it's a fascinating topic. And I think the good thing is that now it's rather complex. It also, all these different biases or heuristics present an opportunity for retailers to optimize their pricing, to not just talk about price levels, but also about different aspects of their of their offering. So let's continue here. And as probably most of you, or I think all of you, will agree that retail pricing is rather complex. So what we've seen during the last years, it's really that many retailers actually leave money at the table for various reasons. And here we just mention a couple of them. So the first one is we call blanket pricing. So that retailers are either very competitive on promotions only, or what probably is even worse from a profitability perspective, that they are competitive across all products in order to try to gain customers with low prices, but basically often the short run, but definitely in the long run, this actually puts their margins at risk. The second challenge many retailers are facing is the fact that they only focus on the top SKUs. It's understandable since the volumes are often huge. It's rather complex, especially if you offer products in various countries. But also this means that if you just focus on top SKUs, you definitely leave money at the table. Price changes is a hot topic in these days, especially when you're talking about dynamic pricing. But often we see that prices are changed too infrequent. And one of the key reasons is also that retailers say that they're miss a support from a good tool, from a tool which enables them actually to tailor their price changes to the specific market, to their customers. And that will be definitely something we're also talking about today with the offering from Quicklizard. Or pricing even falls through the cracks. That is also, it's just fascinating. I mean, yesterday I attended the first pricing conference here in Zurich at the Dolder, and everybody agreed that now pricing is incredibly important from the EBIT perspective. It's still often not really clear in companies whose task it is to focus on. So is it more the category management? Is it marketing? Is it sales? Sometimes maybe even controlling of finance. So often it's just not clear, and that also means that it's managed not terribly well. So having said that, we of course acknowledge that getting this right is not trivial. And to manage your expectations, we have no silver bullet. So we claim not that we have found the one solution which fits it all, but definitely we've brought some very interesting insights and solutions to you, which definitely help in order to get more transparency and to become more profitability. So what we've seen also during the last project is that companies who do it well definitely profit from a better EBIT margin. Usually they increase sales, which is great because it gives them more flexibility in terms of using the money to reinvest in even more sophisticated pricing and better product ranges, more customer service, and so on and so forth. And the good thing is that the topic in itself, it is complex. And we will talk about data quality and data quantity in a second, but still, you don't have to start a couple of years projects in order to become better. So implementation time, if you're doing it right, can be easily just between 12 and 16 weeks. And then it's a journey. So it's not that you do it once and then everything is settled, but definitely is a journey. Okay, so let me continue now. Speaking about the maturity of pricing, what we've seen is in discussions and also how the pricing function developed over time. As I said, it's a journey. So many companies we would say, are more in the area of the cost plus pricing with some insights from competition. And I won't say that this is bad. So you definitely have to be very well aware of your prices. And I also completely acknowledge that sometimes it's rather difficult to understand what your cost per article per selling unit is. So definitely this is an important platform and an important starting point. But you shouldn't leave money on the table by just doing cost plus, because often customers' price acceptance is higher than you would think. That, by the way, is also an insight I encounter in all of my projects, is that often the companies, the providers, or the retailers are much more price sensitive than their customers. And that basically leads to the problem that they educate their customers to become bargain hunters because they're just focusing on price. And they basically, the increasing price sensitivity in retail is definitely to a certain extent not just driven by inflation and all these topics, but definitely also a homegrown problem driven by the often rather price aggressive communication of companies. So but coming back to the maturity level of pricing is, of course, you should have a certain understanding of your competitors' pricing, but you also should acknowledge that not everybody is constantly comparing prices. So yes, it's important, but don't focus too much on competitor pricing because that basically would take up too many resources. And you definitely should better understand how customer decision processes work, which is basically then what we call the behavioral pricing. So now, having said that, this doesn't mean that you have to wait till you have completely understood all the psychological biases, etc., before you can start your journey. But you should just be aware that there are many more opportunities out there. Now, the point is that if you agree on that, and usually, yeah, retailers do so, they will come up with the challenge of data. And this definitely is true. In order to better understand what's happening out there in the market, in order to better understand how price sensitive customers are, what other drivers are there to drive price acceptance, so to increase prices, it all mean that you need good data and a lot of data. Now, having said that, again, don't wait till it's perfect because that will never happen. So we strongly encourage retailers to start with maybe sometimes just small pilots, but to start with what they have in order then to to kick off the journey and not wait. So the biggest mistake is what you can do is just copy competitors' prices to have a kind of lean approach, or wait till it's perfect, because then definitely you leave money on the table. Now, having said that, just a few numbers to give more evidence how important or how great the opportunities are which the new large language models and GPT approaches give us. So they not just drive efficiency increases and give us more time for customers, but definitely they also are able to drive customer satisfaction, because you are then able to tailor your pricing more to your target segments, to your markets, which basically pays off in terms of lower switching rates and a definitely higher price enforcement. Now, having said that, one should assume, well, I mean, then everybody should be fine. They should implement the tools. But what we've learned from a recent survey in Germany, but I assume that it's true in many more countries, since we have a rather international audience here, is that basically less than a third of retail managers consider current investments in AI to be sufficient. So we definitely have a gap here. So you see here AI, so they completely agree with the statement that AI either is or will be important for decision making, but then only 27% said, yeah, AI is currently used for decision making. So here we already see a gap, a rather big one, and a similar gap also when it comes to the statement company invests sufficiently in AI applications. And that's just for pricing. We also see these gaps for forecasts, for assortment management, and for actions and promotions. Now, coming back to the initial topic of complexity. Here we just mention some of the key drivers why retail pricing is so terribly complex. So when talking about prices, there's not just one price. So there's a manufacturer recommended sales price, there's a recommended retail price, there's, for example, the minimum advertised price, apart from all the legal constraints we face in various countries. There's a shelf price, there might be a loyalty price, a promo price, coupon price, whatsoever. So having said that, there definitely is not just one price. And then this basically this can be multiplied, or this is even it's becoming more complex because we're talking of often of huge portfolios. So we have different types of SKUs, and we're coming to this then in very few minutes when I hand over to Fabian, talking more about key value items versus long tail. And that's one of the big challenges also for retailers to better understand the segmentation of the articles, talking about private labels versus branded, which definitely work very differently. The topic of relationships with customers and other different variants depending on the kind of retail sector you're working in. And this again is multiplied by all the different channels you're working in. So online, offline, if you sell via a marketplace, like for example, Galaxis here in Switzerland, maybe Amazon somewhere else, or Bragg, just to name very few big players. Then the question is, okay, different regional markets, different currencies. So I think you're well aware of all these challenges. So but this basically shouldn't stop you from starting. And before I actually hand over to Fabian, I would like to, again, manage a little bit expectations. So, as I said previously, there's no holy grail to solve it. And just to repeat, I think one important message is the biggest mistake is just not to do anything. So just to wait, because then definitely other retailers will be more profitable very soon than you. And here are 4 misbeliefs we would like to demystify or put some more transparency on. So the first one is the measurability. Now, if you're a fan of behavioral pricing, you will definitely know that many price drivers are not easy to measure, or sometimes even are not measurable. For example, the consumer mood, the exact drivers, it's just getting too complex, and it's getting artificial if you try to do it in a classical survey, because then consumers start, for example, to rationalize. Then the accessibility of data. So what can be measured sometimes is not accessible, or it outdates too quickly. The next point is the data scarcity. So especially for slow movers, or depending in some areas of B2B, you're just lacking the sheer amount of data to apply some, let's say, fancy AI tool. So you have to find solutions how you can fill this missing data, and then the predictability. So even if you have data, it's accessible, you have sufficient data, the question is, will the truth from yesterday and today, will it be true tomorrow? And especially in these days, we have seen so many structural changes with the COVID, with COVID, with all these wars currently happening. So it's becoming more complex. So, but as I said, there are definitely solutions out there to start to work on pricing, and without just focusing on price elasticity. And having said that, I'd like to hand over to Fabian to continue.
All right. So the Holy Grail is not the solution, as we just learned. Also, the black box that kind of wraps the Holy Grail does not exist. So just outsourcing pricing to a tool is not the solution, even now being a tool provider. However, tool is always a means to an end. And that's also how you should approach the whole topic. See pricing as a journey, see it as an evolution, starting small and then scaling fast and big. Exactly as Patricia said, not waiting until everything is in place and waiting and waiting and waiting and only then potentially start working. Instead, get started early on, find some easy use cases and start improving and over time getting better and better. And second element about that also, AI is amazing, great opportunities, more accuracy, new data sources that can be used, new ways of working that can be applied. However, we still are convinced and believe that not only the human should be in the loop, but the human should be in control. And therefore, actually, we prefer the term augmented over artificial intelligence. So AI as a means to make smarter human decisions, and also a pricing tool that uses AI in a way to make human decision making smarter, better, and faster, but not replacing them. So talking about the complexity of pricing, we found it's easy, to solve different problems than the one big problem. Therefore, one of the first steps we usually do with clients when onboarding them into our tool, we implement a article segmentation approach that identifies the different roles of items in the assortment. So the typical idea is that KVIs are shaping the price perception. They are the reason to buy, the reason for customers to go into the store. And the strategic implication for pricing is that here it's important to have the right position versus competition. On the other end of the scale is what we call the profit generators. For these items, customers are less price sensitive, which means there is room to increase prices without being punished. And that's an opportunity to subsidize and cross-finance the investments needed in order to be competitive on the KVIs. The middle segment, which we call the sales drivers, this is, I would say, kind of it's filling the basket. It's all that you need. You are usually not as price sensitive about those items, but also not as indifferent about them like for the profit generators. So they're a mix of both, I would say, in terms of strategic intent, which means on the pricing strategy, usually an approach to follow the market average is good, not being insulting in your pricing towards the customer, not being too expensive, but also not overly aggressive. And that's also the segment that is best suited to run promotions from time to time to give customers a nudge and a trigger to start purchasing.
I've just seen there's one question here. Will you explain later on and dig deeper into the question how a retailer can identify which role the different articles have? I mean, if they are a KVI, a sales driver, or profit generator?
That's a good point. In fact, there's multiple ways to do it, and we come to that later on, but sometimes there is already some logic in place. If not, we can offer off the shelf a data-driven approach to do that. It wouldn't be an AI-powered pricing tool if we wouldn't have an AI logic to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Before we get there, exactly, just illustrating what was said before on the slide. Oh, sorry, that's okay. So what does it mean for pricing? For the KVIs, matching competition, at least the relevant competition. So you can illustrate it, see it in an illustrated way here by checking for the competitor prices and kind of matching the right one. On the profit generators, illustrated by the profit parabola, price elasticity is, as let's say, a semi-holy grail for that segment, helping to identify the profit maximizing price point. And for sales driver, we recommend usually to implement a strategy which combines both approaches, using competition to set the guardrails to avoid insult pricing, and within those guardrails, optimizing for growth and for revenues, again, using elasticity or other machine learning models to come up with their ideal price point amongst those constraints. Now, exactly for your question, Patricia, that was raised in the panel. So if there is no existing segmentation logic in place, we offer a data-driven approach in the tool that runs in the background, leveraging all the transactional data from the different data sources, online, offline, depending on where and how the retailer is active in the market. And this data reflects now the behavioral aspects of pricing also are being seen here in the data side, different stages of the shopping journey. So on the very left-hand side, you see the funnel indicating the shopping journey from getting, let's say, attention, desire to buy, down to being a loyal customer of the retailer and repurchasing items. And it's important in our view that a scoring model to identify KVIs covers the full breadth of all these different aspects. Why? Because you don't want to invest in a KVI, which is amazing to generate one-off transactions, but customers would never come back. The nature of KVIs is in often leading to a very low to even zero or negative margins at times. So if you cannot get a healthy basket mix or a long-term repurchasing customer, it might not be worth the investment. Therefore, it's so important to mix metrics that cover the upper funnel, but also the lower funnel, kind of the shopper perspective. What is a KVI in the eyes of a shopper, but also the company and retailer's perspective. What are items where I am willing to invest? Now, just picking a couple of examples to make it more tangible. If we think about the upper funnel, it's things like competitive dynamics. How many retailers have listed that SKU? How often do they change the price? What's the amplitude of their price changes? All this information gives a good feeling about how much this item seems to shape or how important price is for this item. Or number three, the traffic cost. Now, this is one of the few ones of these metrics that can only be measured in the online context. Most of the others, I would even say all the others, can be also measured offline like this or with a proxy as a fallback variable. But for the traffic cost, this is basically meaning how much you have to pay per conversion or per click to get traffic on your website. And again, implicitly, that shows how much competition other retailers are putting on that SKU, and that also helps identify the KVIs from the other items. Number 5, price elasticity. I think that goes without saying. The more elastic a SKU, the more likely it's a KVI. Number 7, the basket opening rate. What is the first item customers put in the basket? Much more likely to be the KVI versus what is being added throughout the shopping journey towards the end of the shopping. This is usually more the profit generators. Imagining going to the supermarket, you go for milk and butter. That might be the KVI because you put it in your basket first. You know the price of milk and butter by heart. And then before the checkout, you find some flowers and batteries, and you just add them to the basket without even looking at the price. Now, if we go further down, maybe 2 more, the purchase frequency is also important. Coming back again and again is a predictor of how likely customers memorize the price on the one hand, but also it's now moving us to the internal dimension. It's also an indicator whether it's worth investing in such SKUs, because loyal customers, repurchasing customers, of course, always giving you as a retailer more opportunities to cross and upsell them in the upcoming shopping journeys. And maybe the last one, the repurchase rate is also an interesting KPI. If you come back after purchasing one item and do many other purchases as well, it's also making you much more attractive as a shopper for the retailer. So it's worth more investing in those SKUs. That's about the scoring model. And this is just one of many data-driven approaches that help coming from our tool, you take better pricing decisions. If you think about this framework labeled as 3 lenses of pricing, so they basically reflect the different economical aspects prices need to kind of marry in one go. It's price needs to cover cost, else you might sell at a loss. Price needs to reflect the value an item generates for the customer. And third, price is never seen in an isolated vacuum space. It's always relative to competition. So merging all these 3 lenses into the decision-making is actually the fine art of taking the right price decision. And in order to do this properly, our tool provides a couple of metrics here that can help, and algorithms and AI gives exactly these, the unlock here to get this information. Thinking about the cost specifically, for example, AI can help to manage the inventory levels in a healthy way, ensure you have a overstock pricing routine running if the warehouse is too full and you might sit on stock before the season ends, or ensuring you clear the stock of the old iPhone before the new iPhone is being launched. All this can be done automatically with machine learning and AI models. in order to balance kind of the warehousing and logistic cost. Thinking about the customer value, as we just talked about, the article segmentation reflects the different roles items play for the shopper. And that's also a data-driven approach that makes decision-making much more accurate. Thinking about competition, that's probably the most, let's say, the first thing people have in mind when they think about a pricing tool. Matching competition, of course, that's an easy one, as we saw on the maturity levels before that Patricia shared. It's probably not yet the final evolution. It's more the starting point. But the way how you do it is where the big difference comes from. So if you just match any competitor, basically you just start a price war and you have a downward pricing spiral and everybody is losing in the end. However, you can identify those competitors that really matter. For example, those that your shoppers have in mind when they make a purchase decision. For example, a module that we call the competitor sensitivity identifies which of the competitors on a SKU level seem to matter when it comes to purchase decisions of your shoppers. So like this, you can decide on the spot for every SKU what competitors you should look at and match prices and which competitors you can ignore and avoid the price war on a broader scale. If you take now the overlay of the different lenses, many more models can be handy. Of course, using elasticity to find the right balance to optimize for profit and revenue, balancing value and cost. Thinking about cross elasticity in the assortment, what happens if you change the price of one product with the demand for the other products, if they are substitutional. Thinking about vicious pricing cycles, said anticipating it with the competitor sensitivity. But if that still is happening, acting quickly to stop the cycle. And most important of all, having a predictability of demand. So what is expected to be the future demand without a price change? How is this expected to change if you change a price? So what is the optimal price in order to get the highest outcome for your business? So these are different ways how AI and data can improve pricing decision making. And this is also a reason why a tool is a very effective and powerful means to come up with better price decisions.
I think, yeah, actually, a couple of other questions popped up. So the one is, well, many retailers are somehow concerned about dynamic pricing, that it could influence their price image if it's getting too, let's say, too dynamic, so too frequent. So what, according to your experience, Fabian, are your recommendations how to deal with dynamic pricing? Which kind of rules should you stick to in order to avoid that basically your price image deteriorates?
It's a very good one. Price fairness is a topic in itself on the one hand, but also sometimes too many price changes might also have a negative impact on the shoppers, because then they might feel, well, maybe there is a reason for all this dynamics. Maybe I should look around somewhere else. I would say in a first step, the dynamics of price changes automatically are depending on the article segment. So for KVIs, it's important to be competitive every day and be very dynamic, because that's also what the competition is doing. For profit generators instead and sales drivers, you can be much more static on prices. So there's kind of an implicit solution by the article role and article segment. At the same time, there might also be strategic, let's say, decisions to keep a certain stability period, a freeze period for products, depending on the category. Now, thinking back about the times at Zooplus, there is pet food and you buy the same pet food every month again and again. So there is some benefit in having stability in those prices just for the sake of the stability. So these are also strategic intents that need to be considered when setting up the pricing strategy.
Another question is talking about all these promos. Usually what is a huge challenge for retailers to understand the real effect of a promotion or of basically various types of discount campaigns, because depending on the kind of articles you're selling, there's also often a kind of forward buying happening, so that basically of course your revenue increases dramatically if you put some articles on a discounted price, but then people just buy it in bulk. and put it on their shelves at home and then wait till they have to buy it again. Any insights, or what's your experience with these kind of forward buying activities?
So first of all, I think it's important to make sure that pricing and promotions are managed together. And we have good experience using also the article segmentation for that. For example, excluding promotions on KVIs because the definition of a KVI is to have the best price already on a daily base. So every monetary promotion on top is kind of questionable in terms of the uplift. At the same time, promotions on the profit generators are also not advisable because there is, by definition, no elasticity. So I would anyhow isolate promotions on the sales drivers only. Now, when it comes to measuring the promotion effectiveness for sales drivers as SKUs, it's exactly as you say, there is different effects. You need to measure when you extract the baseline sales, what you would have sold without the promotion running, versus the uplift to extract the real net effect of a promotion. And that means, on the one hand, positive effects like the halo effect, customers come into the store because of the promotion and then they buy more than they initially planned. There is negative effects. The promotional item might distract the demand of the substitutional items. And then there is time delayed effects as the pantry loading or forward buying. And all this needs to be considered when measuring the real net uplift. So that's, of course, exactly the mathematical exercise to be done. And that's also something together with the article segmentation that then helps you set up a perfectly aligned pricing promotion strategy.
Okay, I think there are no more questions, so I think we can move on.
So now, before I think we might even have time to have a quick look into the tool to make it a bit more tangible. Now, we talked a lot about shouldn't be a black box. It needs to be transparent. It needs to be understandable. Pricing needs to be steered. It needs to be trusted by the responsible people. And therefore, the question is how you best implement it. Is it like do it yourself, programming the own tool? Is it outsourcing to a black box? Or what we actually promote or are convinced to be the best solution? It's actually best of both worlds, doing it with a tool to kind of skip the time and effort to build the infrastructure. Like there's so many things you need to get a proper pricing, right? You need the APIs to connect the data. You need to do a lot of data cleaning, have a harmonized data model. You need to build certain modules to optimize for pricing, be it competition, be it revenue, be it for profit. There's a lot of things in the user interface and the workflows that needs to be established with pricing governance logic. Who can see what information, which margins are visible, which persons or which category managers can see what assortment, how are decisions being taken from fully automated to manual approval, 4 eyes principles, what dashboards and visualizations. There's so many things that you need to do in order to come, let's say, to have the AI facilitate humans to make better decisions. And a lot of that stuff is not really, let's say, bringing a competitive advantage or a competitive edge. That's why investing time to build all that, what I would call infrastructure. Now it seems a bit too simplistic than it really is. Of course, building the infrastructure is a huge thing. But instead of spending time to building the infrastructure, reinventing the wheel, it's much smarter to leverage existing infrastructure and existing tools and start then creating value with those tools. And there's still enough space. I can show you in the tool later on also that you can customize it to any extent, even build own functions if you feel the given functionalities are not existing or not good enough. Actually, maybe let's have a quick switch.
So I stop sharing, yeah, and I think it's a good point now to jump into the tool, and
Let's see if the technology
cool,
is doing the good job. All right.
perfect, yeah.
So maybe just starting screen, now imagining you're like a category manager, you're opening up a tool or the tool and you see a first overview, how you're performing, your revenues, your profits, different metrics, conversion rates. So this is nice from a business perspective, but then much more important, what are your daily tasks? So then you can look into an operational view and get an understanding of the upcoming price changes, and you see a couple of them have been automatically accepted in the tool already. That's what you see in the upper right. But there are few price changes that need a manual review, and then you can look into those and see a list of SKUs. And as you can imagine, this is of course all dummy and demo data, so please don't look at this and take it too serious. So you can look at the price recommendations here, current price, recommended price. What's the implication? Do you want to accept it? Yes or no? If you don't want to accept it, you can even override it and give an override reason. And of course, it's all being documented and logged for auditing purposes. As said before, like that's infrastructure you don't need to build, and you can have a deeper look. And now this is very important about the explainability of pricing. So whenever there is a price recommendation, the tool will tell you where are your competitor prices, what is this product kind of, what article segment does it belong to? This actually also reflects the segmentation as shown before. So they can be KVIs, sales drivers, or profit generators. So going back to this one example, let me just double check here. This now was coming out of the product group new products, so it was not a KVI in that sense. And the pricing strategy associated was a cluster elasticity approach. And then you can look into the pricing logic and see how and why a price has been applied, depending on different models running and down to rounding. So all this is visible and transparent in the tool and can be seen and understood before making a final decision. Also, as you
And I think
mentioned
that's one,
before,
sorry to interrupt you, Fabian, but I think what you just have shown, the various pricing strategies or approaches, I think that's really key, that you have to decide first how you want to deal with the different articles. So assuming you have segmented them, you still need this concept, and that's something which is very conceptual. And of course, you then need a tool to implement it. But I think that's a huge benefit of this tool, that yeah, you basically drive it. You really start from your pricing strategy, your pricing approach, and then you basically assign the articles to the various groups. And then basically you learn from the reactions from the market, maybe also sometimes to adjust your strategic approach.
Exactly. So as you've seen before, the article segments, it's a typical way of the tool, how it's being set up. Like in this case, all the KVIs are associated with a pricing strategy that matches for competition. All the sales drivers, as said before, identification is automatically associated with a strategy that optimizes for sales, and profit generators, we would optimize for profit. And all this information is also visible in the tool. So if we go back to the price recommendations, there's a couple of more products here. You see all these attributes down here, like AI insights, what's the sensitivity versus competition. So should you consider Amazon, yes or not? What's the article segment of this specific SKU? What's the price elasticity? And any other attributes that the tool is calculating. You see forecast. You see the prices across different channels, also visual way of the forecast of the expected sales, the price history of competition. So as you see, like this approach of combining machine learning models and data science in a way that it's empowering and bringing the category manager into a position to take the decision and take the right decision, but also understand the decision. I think that's always what we really emphasize and what we focus on when we make any new model in the tool. I'm just looking at the time. I mean, don't have the time for a proper demo. Just wanted to give a little look and feel how this can be applied in reality. And maybe just then for that,
We
going
jump
back
back to the presentation.
to the
Yeah,
presentation.
of course. Just a second. Okay. So I think we already discussed this slide, and as you highlighted, it's the best is to take it from. I mean, the best approach is to combine the advantages of two worlds. So start with a tool which is already there, and then really fine tune it. And as we've seen, this can evolve, or that basically evolves over time, and also already requires a lot of work. But basically, this approach helps you to maximum the USP and still control or try to minimize the total cost of ownership. so that you don't have to wait for sometimes even for years in order to see the benefits of this approach or this tool. Okay, so yeah, having said that, we coming to kind of summary. I mean, we know that it's a very complex multidimensional topic. So therefore, we'd like to structure the key aspects here in this summary. So it all, as I just highlighted, it all starts with strategy. So you have to create alignment first. You need an internal consensus on your pricing. So you have to get the stakeholders on board in order to agree. And this also means not just people, let's say, from product development, marketing, or from the C-level, but definitely also your first customer. And usually, I mean, your first customer is depending on which kind of revenue model and distribution model you apply. Your first customer is often the salespeople. So if you're not in a pure online context where you sell directly to your consumers, so let's say a hybrid approach, so definitely it's make sure that you not just agree on how you want to set prices, but also how you want to implement them, because otherwise you come up with great suggestions, but they won't happen in the market if you don't have your salespeople on board. So you really you have to think it through. You have to make sure that you really have a strong pricing strategy which suits your company, which matches market conditions, of course, in order how your implementation path will look like over time. So, and what usually really helps is to define concrete use cases. So, in which area, or maybe which kind of, which part of the portfolio do you want to start, or do you want to focus first on one market before you expand it? So to make it as specific as possible, and usually success is contagious. So if you have run a good pilot, which is really profitable, even if it's just small scale, as Fabian you just highlighted, then definitely it's time to grow, and it will be just much more easier for you to also grow into from an internal perspective. So philosophy is the next bullet point or the next area we would like to touch base on. And I quite like the idea that we're not talking about completely artificial intelligence, but that we are talking about empowering humans. That's something I have seen in all the past discussions on artificial intelligence, is that those approaches which are really successful come up with a good combination. So it's more really augmented intelligence. So it's definitely worthwhile to spend a lot of thinking on how you want to make sure that you empower your pricing managers or your salespeople, how to manage the toolbox, so that basically still your pricing manager remains the expert, and then he is supported by a good tool. I think what is extremely important is the fact that it's no black box, because then it will happen over time that you don't understand the recommendations of the tool, and this definitely doesn't help implementation. So you risk basically acceptance internally. So you definitely have to make sure that it's a glassbook approach, like what you've seen here with Quicklizard, and that basically let's say the pricing managers or the category managers still are in the driver's seat, supported of course by the tool, but not completely overruled by recommendations they don't understand. It's a journey we just said, so definitely it should be a very interactive approach with all the different stakeholders internally. So it's not that you implement it and then let it go. So definitely make sure that you have the right people on board from the very beginning, because that also is a lesson from psychology. If people basically have the feeling that they're involved, that they're co-developers, then they definitely will also support the approach and the tool. And give more chances to higher EBITs. So yeah, as we said, there's no silver bullet, which also means there's not one approach which fits it all. So I think therefore definitely a good conceptual phase should happen in the beginning in order to understand what the needs are of the different parties, of different categories maybe, or different markets, and then decide also which functionalities, for example, you want to use of the tool. And yeah, we have said this a couple of times, but I think definitely it makes sense to repeat it again. It's a journey. So start with smaller pilots and then scale it when you have understood how it works, what fits best your organization in order to become successful. And also roll it out when the organization and the markets are really ready for it. And as I said, if the pilot went well, usually success is contagious, and then it becomes more a pull than a push approach also in the organization. Yeah, and permanent prototyping, what do we mean by that? So price optimization is an ongoing task. So as we have said, we are living in currently very, very challenging times with many structural changes. So we cannot just assume that what worked in the past or what works today will also work tomorrow or next week. So definitely it's an ongoing task, but the good point is not just a tool, but also the pricing managers will learn. And also, of course, since I think, Fabian, with all your experience we've seen in the beginning, you'll definitely profit also, of course, from the experience yeah, of the tool and the people implementing it. I stop sharing here to open the round so that we can have more discussion. Either from a conceptual perspective, strategic perspective, or also more questions on the tool itself, on the approach. So definitely we have, I think, very few minutes, 4 minutes left to answer any kind of question. I think one topic which usually pops up is the fact that we said in the beginning that we mentioned its implementation time of 12 to 16 weeks. Maybe Fabian, you could highlight, I mean, what do retailers have after let's say, 16 weeks?
Yeah, it sounds too good to be true because from consulting experience, I know, and I guess, Patricia, you have seen as well, can also be 12 to 16 months. And when we say weeks, it's really weeks. This is from the first day of starting the joint journey until the tool is live and giving price recommendations. And this, of course, only works by parallelizing the IT implementation on the one hand, connecting to the APIs and the data, with the business and strategic implementation of configuring the tool, activating the right AI modules for the right article segments. But then after 16 weeks, it's active and live and gives recommendations. And what we see often that still then it's a phase of being applied in one category and then running A/B tests before rolling it out to further categories. But it's live and it's working. It makes life of people already easier.
And I assume that one of the biggest bottlenecks basically is the retailer strategy, so that they assume they have this kind of pricing strategy. But what I've seen in the past projects is that well, it's mainly in the brains of the people dealing with prices, but it's not really defined on a conceptual basis. I mean, not the fact that it's not written down, but also the rules are kind of sometimes very very unstructured. So, or people then when they start to discuss on pricing, they figure out that they have assumed that they have a strategy, but that they have also that there are contradictions or conflicts sometimes even in what they think what is the right approach. Is that the fact also according to your
100%.
experience?
It's sometimes an eye opener when you have to kind of hard code it in a tool, then it becomes obvious if people understand what they're doing And that's also a reason why it makes sense to do it together. And that's also the reason why we are being two faces here on the screen, because that's where a consultancy can be the catalyst to make sure everybody's aligned and to make sure there is a strategy in place and to manage all the process, all this transformation. A journey is a nice way, but in the other hand, it's a transformational journey and someone needs to manage that transformation.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe one last comment also, what I've seen in the past is sometimes people, I mean, what we've seen in your kind of demo is that the tool suggested decreases, but what we've seen is that if the tool or if basically also market research, so there's empirical evidence that you could increase prices rather heavily, that often companies or the pricing managers are not really as happy as one would think. So have you seen that too? And how do you deal with that? Because I mean, often, usually the fact is that they either don't believe it, or the other thing is that basically they feel that somebody could accuse them of and why haven't you increased the prices earlier? So why did you leave so much money on the table?
I mean, that's a good thing of a tool. It's not emotional. It decreases or increases depending on what the data says. And that's sometimes a big difference versus manual price matching. Everybody's happy to decrease, but nobody wants to go up again. And the tool just trusts the data and does whatever is right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think here again, it is great that it's a glass box approach, so that you really can understand where the recommendation is coming from, and that it's safe to trust it. So having said that, I think we are, again, 1 minute late again, but we started also 2 minutes later, so I think that's fine. So thanks to everybody who joined. For those who couldn't make it, we've recorded the session, which I basically will stop,